The night Victor Kane hosted his $1 million gala, he mocked a young K-9 officer and said his family was born to scrub floors. He said it loud enough for the whole room to hear, including his daughter. A few hours later, that same father and daughter would be begging him for help, and the only thing standing between their safety and the world Victor built was the dog he had just called trash. Not a soldier, not a hero, just a K-9 he never respected. If you want to know why the richest man in the room ended up owing his life to the two people he despised the most, hit subscribe and watch until the moment money can't protect him. Gray morning light seeped through the training hall windows, soft as cold breath on glass. Rain clung to the wind like a quiet warning, tapping faintly against the metal roof. Liam Hayes was 29, a young K-9 officer with the posture of someone who had learned to stand against life more than with it. He carried the rugged presence of a working-class man, shaped by long days, cheap meals, and a past that never asked if he was ready. His hair was short, brown, still damp from the drizzle outside. His navy police jacket was zipped neatly to the collar, clean but worn from repeated washes, the kind done by someone who could not afford to replace anything before it truly died. He spoke little, not out of pride, but because he had learned silence was the safest way to keep dignity in a world that mistook poverty for ignorance. The hall was filled with the scent of wet concrete and metal, and the murmur of officers preparing for routine drills. Diesel stood among the row of dogs, massive tan and black fur tight over a body built like a battering ram. His wide chest and thick neck set him apart from the leaner K-9s, as if someone had carved him out of muscle and stubbornness rather than bone. Diesel's reputation traveled ahead of him. Dangerous, they whispered, unpredictable, too aggressive. He should have been retired for good. Some called him a mistake. Others refused to work with him. Then came the sound of a baton hitting flesh. Not human, but K-9. A trainer, red-faced and impatient, struck a smaller dog to correct its obedience. The hall went silent, except for the sharp panting of frightened animals. Diesel, without hesitation, charged forward and clamped down on the trainer's arm. It was not wild rage. It was precise, protective, as if the big dog understood something more than orders and punishment. The baton clattered across the floor. Voices exploded. Put him down. He's out of control. That beast should have been put away. Liam stepped forward before he had time to weigh caution. His voice was low, steady, almost astonished at its own bravery. Dogs don't bite good men, he said. He was protecting someone. It silenced the room in a way no shouted command ever could. Diesel loosened his grip and stood by Liam's side, breathing heavily but not trembling. For a moment they looked like two creatures shaped by the same kind of hardship, misjudged because they learned to defend rather than obey. The captain did not like hesitation, but he could not deny what he had seen. "Hayes," he muttered, "congratulations. He's yours. Trial supervision. If he fails, you both go." Liam nodded. Diesel leaned into his leg, not affectionately, but as if recognizing a fellow exile. Rain pressed harder outside, its steady rhythm like a quiet promise. The world can be cruel, but strength is not always violence, and for the first time in years, something warmer than fear stirred inside Liam. Perhaps respect, perhaps fate, or perhaps the simple truth that even the unwanted deserve someone who will not walk away. The treatment room smelled of disinfectant and rain-soaked fabric, as if the weather had followed them indoors. The building hummed with quiet fluorescent light, pale and tired. Liam sat on a wooden bench beside the massive dog, his navy jacket still damp at the shoulders, Diesel stood stiffly, not from wounded pride or defiance, but from something older, something learned. When the metal tray rattled against a counter, Diesel's entire frame tensed, his thick neck tightening as if bracing for a blow. He didn't bare teeth, didn't fight. He only waited, trembling with a fear too practiced to be called instinct. Liam watched, and in the silence, he remembered hands, his mother's hands, scratched raw from bleach and cold floors. Helen Hayes had been a woman in her 40s, dressed in a gray janitorial uniform, hair tied back, quiet as worn shoes. She never struck back when wealthy tenants barked at her for being slow, for being visible. Her fingers trembled too, not from weakness, but from knowing that even a breath out of place could cost her a job. Diesel waited now with that same kind of trembling, like someone learning how to survive other people's anger. The veterinarian, a calm woman in a faded blue coat, approached with a gentle voice, explaining that the dog had old training scars, injuries from shock collars and strikes meant to make him obey faster. Diesel lowered his head, except in the examination, like a guilty creature asking forgiveness for something he never chose to do. Liam placed a steady hand near the thick fur of the dog's neck without touching him at first. Dogs earn trust the way poor men did, slowly, without asking. Diesel turned slightly, allowing Liam to touch the faint scar at the base of his throat. The fur was dense, but beneath it lay a story scratched by metal and impatience. Liam didn't whisper reassurances. He simply stayed, letting presence be its own form of compassion. He understood then that Diesel wasn't afraid of pain. Pain, like labor, was familiar. What he feared was the return of the strike, the sudden metal sound, the moment a body tightens not to fight, but to endure. Liam had lived the same way, never breaking, just waiting for life to finish swinging at him. Their worlds had taught them the same lesson. Those without power learn obedience not from respect, but from surviving other people's cruelty. In the quiet room, with rain thinning to a mist outside the window, Diesel leaned his heavy body just enough to rest against Liam's leg. Not affection, permission. Liam did not see himself as a savior, but he knew the worth of someone who had been used, judged, and blamed for simply being strong. He knew that trust was a language without words, and he made a promise not aloud, but through the stillness of his hand on Diesel's scar. No more blows, no more fear. They would not bow to the world again for permission to exist. Cold evening air clung to the steps outside the Grand Hotel. Lights spilled from tall glass doors like warm wine, spilling across the pavement where nights were longer than time itself. Inside, polished marble reflected chandeliers that glowed like small suns. Servers moved in quiet lines, dressed in black and white like obedient shadows. Liam Hayes stood among them, a silent figure in a fully zipped Navy K9 jacket, hands resting near his duty belt without tension. Beside him, Diesel paced with slow, heavy strides, his barrel chest rising like a steady tide. The dog's fur, thick and tan with black shadows, caught the gold light in ways no jewelry could. Both stood on duty, yet neither belonged in this place where money dressed itself like morality. Liam did not mind the silence. Poverty had taught him not to need attention. But Diesel met it differently. The big dog observed every hand gesture, every forced laugh, every raised voice. He recognized tension the way others recognized perfume. At the far end of the ballroom stood Victor Kane, a man in his 50s with silver hair combed back and a black tailored suit that fit him as if the world were designed to serve him. His voice was smooth, familiar like a repeating story, told by men who never doubted themselves. Kane was not loud, but he carried a presence that made others straighten their posture as if being graded. When a nervous young waiter stumbled and spilled a tray, one of Kane's bodyguards shoved the boy with casual cruelty, as if pushing furniture out of the way. Liam stepped forward, not aggressive, simply standing between them. His face did not burn with anger. It simply refused to move aside. Diesel leaned forward too, not growling, only breathing like a warning. Kane noticed it all, his expression calm as marble. A nearby officer, older and easy with gossip, leaned toward him and whispered, "His mother used to clean your office building, the janitor woman." The words slid through the air like greasy fingerprints left on a glass. Kane's lips curled, not in amusement, but in recognition of a hierarchy he never questioned. "He was born to clean floors," he said quietly, the tone almost sympathetic, but not really. "Now he cleans trouble. Same broom, bigger handle." Liam heard him. Diesel sensed it, a low rumble traveling through the big dog's chest. Kane looked down at the dog with the same expression someone might give a dented trash bin forgotten in an alley. "Trash protects trash," he murmured. The sentence wasn't loud, but it was loud enough. Liam stood still, not because he was afraid to speak, but because he understood something new in that moment. His mother's worth had never been small. She simply worked in a world that measured human value the way it measured investments, by what they could buy, not by who they were. Liam felt no shame, only clarity. He rested his hand on Diesel's broad back, feeling the dog steady under his palm. It was a quiet promise, wordless yet full. They would not kneel to men who confused wealth with dignity. A low fog crawled over the city as night settled, clinging to doorways and headlights like a secret refusing to leave. The basement of Kane's estate was nothing like the ballroom above it. Cold air pressed against stone walls, smelling of old wood and something too clean, like sterilized metal. Liam walked slowly across the dim corridor, Diesel at his side, their footsteps echoing lightly. Diesel's thick tan and black fur brushed against Liam's leg with every turn. A single bulb flickered overhead, its yellow light making the shadows sway like restless ghosts. Victor Kane stood ahead, perfectly composed in his tailored suit, as though he had been carved from confidence itself. His voice held no urgency when he unlocked an iron gate, revealing a collection of bottled spirits worth more than most men earned in a lifetime. "Annual inspection," Kane said lightly, as though offering hospitality. "Using your friend here only keeps things transparent." His tone was smooth, but it carried the kind of politeness that weighed on the air like dust before a collapse. Liam signaled Diesel with a quiet hand. The dog moved, nose tracing the seams between crates. Diesel's breathing was heavy, purposeful, a rhythm that filled the basement more than Kane's expensive silence. Liam expected nothing. No drugs, no contraband, nothing that would justify Kane's confidence. Diesel ignored the crates of liquor entirely. Instead, he pressed toward the corners, sniffing metal hinges, wooden bases, and the fabric-wrapped pallets meant for overseas shipment. Suddenly, the dog stiffened, his thick neck rising as if remembering pain. He nudged a stack of sealed boxes, not with eagerness, but with caution. Liam followed, removing a sliver of packing foil. Under the soft scrape of his glove, the smell appeared first, a faint chemical sweetness mixed with something like burnt sugar and bitter anesthetic. The foil was coated with traces of a preservative used to store organic material, illegal without permits. He found bags of shredded paper mixed with bills, stained by the same chemical. Diesel didn't bark. His frame lowered slightly, the way he did when finding what others wanted hidden. Kane stepped closer, his polished shoes silent on the cold floor. He smiled as if someone had told a familiar joke. "You see, your dog is quite useful," he murmured. "He protects my property from being misused. They say large sums attract unclean hands." His politeness cut sharper than anger could. Liam understood. Diesel had not uncovered a crime. Kane had staged one, Evidence could be pointed anywhere, at anyone. Diesel was not a tool of justice tonight. He was bait, a witness that could be forced to testify by his own instincts. Liam didn't argue. His silence was not fear. It was understanding. Kane wanted to know who would speak if corruption breathed too loud. Diesel leaned closer to Liam, not out of anxiety, but readiness. Liam rested his hand on the dog's broad back, feeling that trust again. Not loyal to authority, loyal to truth. He told himself quietly, like a prayer only two could hear, "They will not use us to lie." Wind rushed through the loading dock behind the hotel, carrying the sharp scent of wet asphalt and spilled diesel fuel. The gala noise echoed faintly behind the heavy doors, muffled by velvet and wealth. Out here, the air felt colder, raw, and honest. Liam stepped outside to follow a suspicious text alert sent to security. His navy K9 jacket caught the drizzle like fine glass beads. Diesel walked with him, massive and silent, his thick tan and black fur dampened but not bothered by the rain. The loading dock lights flickered, humming against the silence. Two men in dark clothing moved quickly toward the back of a van. Liam's training told him to wait for backup. But it wasn't his training that made him move. He heard a stifled breath, a young one, caught between panic and obedience. When the bigger man yanked the van door open, Liam saw the terrified face of Sienna Kane. She was 19, dressed in her long black coat dress, cardigan pressed against her, her posture stiff like a frightened branch. She wasn't crying. She was holding something back, something that looked like a truth too heavy for someone so young. One of the men held a knife low, angled backward, not to threaten, but to silence. Diesel moved before Liam spoke. The dog launched forward with the force of a battering ram. His jaws clamped onto the man's forearm, not wild, not reckless, but precise, like someone performing a learned skill. The second man tried to restrain Sienna, pulling her into the van. Diesel pivoted, muscles rippling, and used his thick chest to slam the man's knee, knocking him off balance. Then came the leg hook, a rare K9 maneuver meant to immobilize by joint leverage, something only specialized working dogs were ever trained to do. Diesel didn't maul. He neutralized. Liam followed, securing the scene, breath steady, heart tuned to the rhythm of instinct and duty. Sirens began closing in, a distant chorus of justice trying to catch up with what was already happening between rain and steel. Sienna looked up from the pavement, face pale, hair stuck to her cheeks from rain and fear. She had been fighting to speak. Her voice came out in pieces, small but clear. "I thought it wanted to kill us," she whispered, glancing at Diesel's heavy frame as officers pulled the attackers away. "But it saved me." Diesel sat beside Liam, his breathing heavy but calm, rain sliding over his powerful shoulders like it could not touch his purpose. For the first time, Sienna didn't see a dangerous animal. She saw judgment sharpened by loyalty, not rage. Liam didn't answer her. He watched the van door swing open and shut in the wind, the metal clanging like a warning none of them understood fully yet. There was truth buried in this attempt, not just danger, but a message. And Diesel, once dismissed as trash, had revealed a skill that even trained officers couldn't deny. Liam rested his hand on the dog's back, offering no praise, only presence. Diesel accepted it the same way he saved Sienna, without asking for glory. A soft afternoon rain tapped against the station windows, slow and steady, like someone thinking before they spoke. The briefing room smelled of wet wool coats and stale coffee. Liam stood in front of the table where his badge and report lay, still damp from the rain. Diesel sat beside him, large and calm, his fur drying against the floor's cold linoleum. The room was filled with muted voices, chief officers in pressed shirts, shiny pens, polished shoes. Victor Kane entered last. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, the fabric thin and expensive, no coat despite the rain outside. His voice was smooth, like it had been trained to sound generous even when delivering cruelty. He rested both hands on the table as if it belonged to him, and maybe in a way it did. Kane smiled lightly, the kind that hides sharp edges. "Officer Hayes," he said, "we all admire bravery, but recklessness, that ruins careers." His gaze shifted toward Diesel. "You defend a volatile animal, as if it understands loyalty." The chief cleared his throat but said nothing. Kane continued, his words slow, confident, as if reading a verdict he had already paid for. "You protect that thing because you grew up protecting trash. A housemaid wouldn't know the rules of the boardroom." Liam said nothing. He only rested a steady hand on Diesel's leash, as if grounding both of them. Diesel didn't growl, didn't move, only breathed. That quiet breath felt louder than Kane's voice. Liam finally spoke softly, almost like he was remembering rather than arguing. "My mother taught me that people doing their best deserve respect, even if they use a mop, or just their hands." His words weren't sharp, but they struck something deeper than anger. Silence settled over the room, not heavy, just honest, the kind of silence no one wants to confront. Kane leaned back, unimpressed, and nodded to the chief. Papers were signed, sentences delivered without a courtroom. Liam was suspended. Diesel was taken for behavioral evaluation. It sounded clean, legal, yet it felt like punishment dressed in silk. A young officer came to take Diesel's leash. The dog resisted only for a moment, not out of fear, but confusion, like he was waiting for permission. Liam didn't fight. He knelt and placed a firm hand on Diesel's chest. A brief touch, like a promise he didn't need to speak. The leash was handed over. The door closed. Rain continued its slow tapping, steady and patient, like time refusing to rush the truth. A slow wind brushed against the tall glass windows of the corporate tower, carrying the sound of distant traffic like a muted memory. Sienna Kane sat alone in her office, high above the city. The room felt colder than usual, though the air conditioning was low. She wore a light gray blazer, the sleeves slightly rolled, and her hair was loosely tied back, as if she had rushed to work without caring how she looked. 19 years old, too young to be surrounded by expensive leather chairs and silent security monitors. An email notification flashed on her screen, anonymously sent, with no subject line. She hesitated, then clicked. A video opened, grainy security footage, time-stamped, tucked away in some forgotten corner of the camera archive. In the clip, a man in custody was being beaten by Kane's private security, not questioned, punished. A baton struck his ribs again and again, and Diesel, then unassigned, burst forward, not in rage, but in defense. He knocked the guard off the victim, placing himself between violence and the one who had no voice. Diesel didn't snarl. He didn't chase. He stood guard over the injured man until officers arrived in confusion. The truth was stark. Diesel hadn't attacked. He had intervened when a human failed to be human. The footage ended abruptly. Sienna sat frozen. She felt an ache in her chest, not because she was afraid for the man in the clip, but because she had believed her father when he called Diesel dangerous. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "He wasn't saving himself." Her hand trembled as she called Liam. He answered after a long ring, his voice quieter than she expected, like someone who had been using silence to survive. She told him what she saw, no embellishment, no excuses. Her words were soft but sure, like they belonged to someone older than 19. "Your dog, he saved a man." He saved him even when nobody protected him. Even when no one protected him. Her voice cracked as she repeated herself. On the line, Liam didn't speak right away. He only breathed, and that breath felt like relief pushing against grief. For the first time, someone with power acknowledged the truth. Not loud, not angry, just honest. And honesty felt louder than Kane's money. Outside the windows, the wind picked up again, brushing against the building as if applauding a choice quietly made. Sienna took a slow breath, knowing that telling the truth would cost her something. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, not out of shame, but out of resolve. Liam finally spoke. "Thank you." Just that. Nothing more needed. Justice sometimes begins with one person refusing to remain comfortable. The office was still cold, but Sienna didn't feel cold anymore. A soft autumn sun filtered through the tall windows of the city hall, warming the polished floor, as if trying to welcome those rarely invited inside. The building was filled with uniforms today. Hats pressed under arms, jackets brushed clean, badges bright enough to blind under the lights. Yet no one shined brighter than the dog, sitting quietly at the front. Diesel, broad-chested and calm, his silver-black coat brushed but not decorated, no medal hung around his neck, no ribbon pinned to him. He didn't need one. His presence was the ceremony. Beside him stood Liam Hayes, his thin navy windproof K9 jacket zipped neatly, as if simply showing up was his uniform of respect. Some officers avoided his eyes, others nodded with quiet admiration. None could deny why they were gathered. The truth had clawed its way out and refused to be buried by money. Even Kane, the wealthy man who once insulted them, now faced charges for what his fortune tried to hide. Wealth could buy silence, but it could not silence a witness who never lied. A dog trained not for show, but for justice. When Liam stepped forward to speak, the microphone hummed lightly, as though unsure who had the right to use it. His voice carried no anger, only a steady warmth, the sound of someone who had never been heard until now. He spoke not about heroism, not about himself, not even about Diesel's bravery. He spoke of the invisible. "My mother cleaned floors in buildings she was never treated as worthy to walk through," he said. His jacket sleeve flexed slightly as he rested a hand on Diesel's back. People looked at her and saw work, not worth. They looked at this dog and saw danger, not duty. They were wrong both times. A quiet stirred across the room. No applause yet, just listening. Liam paused, letting the silence speak. "Trash doesn't save lives," he continued. "Sometimes the ones they call trash stop harm when the powerful look away." Sienna stood near the edge of the crowd, her blazer rumpled from the long week, hair loosely clipped back. She didn't seek attention. She simply cried without hiding her tears. She had traded comfort for conscience, and in that exchange, she found something money had never given her: peace. Diesel lowered his heavy head onto Liam's boot, anchoring the moment, grounding the room, as if to say the work wasn't his alone. It belonged to anyone who refused to step aside when it mattered. Liam's hand gently tapped the top of the polished K9 service trophy, not triumphant, but grateful. His voice softened to a whisper, just loud enough for those close enough to feel it rather than hear it. "Mom, I didn't change the world with money. I changed it by never looking down on anyone." The applause came late, not loud, earnest. When life makes you feel small, remember this. Value isn't measured by status, titles, or the size of your paycheck. It's measured by the way you stand up for what's right, even when nobody notices. A janitor's hands, a young officer without privilege, and a forgotten K9 proved that dignity can shine brighter than wealth, and loyalty can silence the loudest pride. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who feels overlooked. Leave a comment, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe to be part of a place where character is honored above money. May you be blessed with courage, respect, and unwavering kindness.